Hi, Julia.
Lovely to talk to you. Well, let's talk first of all about a particular story that I just caught my eye yesterday. Police have launched a hate crime probe after A4-sized posters have been put up on lampposts outside a college, along major roads, and on school routes in the Hampshire town of Basingstoke. And those posters say it's okay to be white. Now, Hampshire Constabulary have confirmed they're treating the incident as a hate incident after shocked local residents, it's reported, alerted the force last week. They were reported to the Highways Agency and other local councils as well. Residents began ripping the posters down, but then more and more emerged. I'm quite intrigued. The claim is from one resident that the posters were erected by a neo-Nazi and white supremacy group, but we don't know who put them up. But should someone writing "It's okay to be white" on a poster be treated as a hate crime?
I don't think so. Way too many things are treated as hate crimes these days. You'll remember that even posters saying the word woman from the dictionary, they are now treated as hate speech too. But, obviously it's not a hate crime to put up a poster saying it's okay to be white. I see, there is a bit of a movement at the moment under the banner, "It's okay to be white." And I see it as an entirely predictable backlash against the identity politics and against the demonization of whiteness. Whiteness has been turned into a kind of pathology. Anyone who's born white is seen as having been born with original sin, the original sin of whiteness, white privilege, racist attitudes, and so on. There is this relentless woke assault on the whole category of whiteness. And it makes perfect sense to me that some people would push back against that and say, look, it's okay to be white. It's not that bad.
Yeah, it's not white supremacist to say it's okay to be white. It is very interesting when you talk about black pride, the capping up, for instance, of the word B, the B of black, but not of W of white, and things like that. I completely understand the historical differences, and that even until really very recently, and some would say still today, you have a different power dynamic between say blacks and whites, men and women, gays and straights, and things like that, and therefore gay pride, women's rights, and black rights, Black Lives Matter movement, and everything that stemmed from that. I can understand where that all comes from and the context. However, it is inevitable that on all of these grounds there will be a backlash when it goes from being, hi, we would like the same rights as everyone else has got, absolutely legitimate and should be the case already, to somehow this is better than what you are. And that, as you say, that you, by being, like, whether it's white or being a man or anything else, that you are not as good as, you are not as pure, you are not as progressive because of those things with which you were born. Because all of this is it's either racism, it's sexism, it's whateverism, isn't it?
It is. And I think, lo and behold, if you judge everyone by skin color, people will start defining themselves by skin color. Yeah. I mean, that it's so completely unsurprising. If you constantly say to people, well, you're just a white man, you're a white woman, you would hold those views, you would behave in that way. If you constantly define people by their whiteness, then they are going to respond in kind and say, okay, I'm a white person and it's not that bad. My view is that all identity politics is bad. There's nothing proud about being white. Me and you have no control whatsoever over what skin color we ended up with. It's not an achievement. I think, I want to call me old fashioned, but I think we should judge people by their character, not their color. I don't care.
It'll never catch on, Brendan. You and I have discussed this so many times that that's how we were brought up. And I think that's how most people in this country were brought up. And being told to completely obsess about these things is ridiculous. And again, you and I, many people, we've been warning there will be a backlash. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be entirely predictable, and it's created by these sort of divisions. Let's talk about something different now. Let's talk about SLEAZE. We spoke to Dominic Raab a little bit earlier in this half hour, the Justice Secretary, about these allegations of SLEAZE. We've got the Labour leader Keir Starmer leading these cries at this debate yesterday about Labour SLEAZE and about how the Prime Minister is trashing our democracy. Bit rich from a man who spent 4 or 5 years trying to undermine democracy as the shadow Brexit secretary, but the actual democratic vote for Brexit. But, hey, we'll let that go. But how damaging do you think this has been for the Conservatives and for Boris Johnson personally?
I think it could get more damaging. I think it could spin out of control unless Boris gets a handle on it. My instinct at the moment is that the media are really gunning for Boris over the SLEAZE issue. I'm not sure it's entirely cut through to the public yet. I haven't heard heated debates about it anywhere amongst the kind of normal people I know, but that cut through could happen unless Boris gets a handle on this problem. But the thing that's irritating me is lots of people saying, well, SLEAZE is an inevitable byproduct of the Brexit era. I mean, they've forgotten the MP's expenses scandal and the SLEAZE that dogged the New Labour Party for years and years and years.
Have they forgotten the SLEAZE in the European Parliament and the European Commission? Good Lord.
If you want to see corruption, just look at the Brussels oligarchy. They behave in corrupt ways and they make deals behind closed doors all the time. So there's hypocrisy and double standards in this discussion, and we should get a handle on corruption where it exists, but we shouldn't allow it to be used as a weapon against Brexit or a weapon against democracy.
And it should never be politicised in this way as well. I mean, that's one of the things. I mean, Martin Bell, he stood as a Tatton MP, as independent MP, and I actually met him on that campaign. I was a reporter on the Evening Standard covering that. And he stood as anti-SLEAZE. You know, it was uniting a lot of different parties, standing against Neil Hamilton, who'd insisted on continuing to stand in that seat. But he said, you know, this is very different from the John Major years in the 90s, where he's, you know, there were all these accusations, and then he set up this committee into standards in public life. Whereas Boris Johnson has had the exact opposite. He was trying to protect his mate Owen Paterson, who was, frankly, if you read the report, caught bang to rights, breaking the lobbying rules. You have to take the politics out of this. You cannot be protecting an MP because they happen to agree with you on your politics.
The way the government handled this is staggeringly inept. I can't remember a government behaving in such a terrible way in recent times.
Well, except the last time that this government behaved in a staggeringly inept way.
But the incompetence was breathtaking. They stood behind Owen Paterson. We're going to defend our mate. Then they backtracked. They sacked people who didn't adhere to the whip, and then they had to unsack them 8 hours later. I mean, just incredible. And in some ways, the mismanagement of this scandal is worse than the scandal itself. But I think the next step, I think, for Boris Johnson's government, because I don't actually want to see this government being overrun by accusations of corruption, they've got to do levelling up. They've got to make sure Brexit happens. They've got a lot of stuff to do. But in order to prevent that from happening, prevent corruption from dogging them, they really need to get a handle on it. Boris needs to say something, and they need to have clarity on this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I also ask you about something I asked Dominic Raab about, and that is Plan B. Lots of the obsession this morning, I didn't bother asking about it because I couldn't care less, was about Boris Johnson not wearing a mask in hospital when he on this visit yesterday. By all accounts, Number 10 say when he was in the clinical setting, he did wear a mask. When he was at other parts of the hospital where he was filmed, he didn't wear a mask. If he was told to wear a mask, he should have worn one in a hospital, in my view. But that's for different reasons from necessarily from COVID. But I asked the Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, about why Plan B is still even on the cards, given that we have seen case levels of COVID go down for 16 days in a row to date, despite the fact we have no mask mandate, we have no vaccine passports, and we've got higher case rates despite having those things in Wales and Scotland. Surely Plan B should be completely off the cards now, and yet there is still this obsession with the theatre of mask wearing. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think Plan B has got to go. They've got to stop dangling this like Damocles sword over the head of the population. Yeah. You might have to miss Christmas, or this might happen, or that might happen. They've got to push all that aside. Cases are falling, hospitalizations and deaths are falling, even though we're pretty much back to normal. We're a very open society, and yet cases are falling. That's something we should be celebrating, not whipping up fear about the future. And I think the government is listening to too many COVID hysterics, those people who want us to live in fear of COVID forever. It's got to start listening to more reasonable voices.
Absolutely. And looking at the actual facts and seeing the evidence. It's an old-fashioned idea, but it does work.